What a story. Um, this is a very, very true story that is close to my heart. Um, Back on May the 30th is when this started in 2014, um, in Norfolk, Virginia, with a friend of mine and her husband that lived there. Her husband is a police officer named Brian Jones. Um, Responded to this call of this boy being shot and killed and crashing his car. Responded to that call, um, and was open fired on by the perpetrator, killing him, killing Brian, at the scene. His off-duty partner, which heard the call and also responded, was also shot. He fortunately was not killed. They were both rushed to the hospital. Um, he was later released, and Brian unfortunately passed away at the hospital. This 17-year-old boy was leaving a graduation celebration, like the mother had said, and completely innocent of any wrongdoing. I mean, he had done absolutely nothing to deserve this. This madman um, just went on a shooting spree and didn't care who was in the midst of that shooting spree. Mark didn't deserve what he got. Brian didn't deserve what he got. The other officer didn't deserve what he got either. Um, the only person that did deserve what they got was the perpetrator, and eventually he was also shot and killed. Unfortunately, there were 3 people that day that died needlessly, um, because of the actions of one. Brian had been a 5-year veteran on the police department. He had also been in the Navy. He served in the military in the Navy, was married, had 3 children. The wife and 3 children survive, and have had an extremely rough year. I cannot imagine losing a husband and, or a father. My father was a police officer, and that was a fear to us every day. Not as bad as if he were a police officer today, but that was always a fear of, daddy's going to work, and what happens if he doesn't come home? My father was the first EOD, which was explodant. Oh, helps if I can talk. Explosive ordnance device technician back then. He was the very first one on the police department. And every time he would get called out on a bomb threat, we were scared to death. I mean, we had no idea whether Dad was going to be home, whether he was going to make it through that bomb threat. Thank God, and by the grace of God, he did, and he came home through every one of them and was able to retire. Brian will not get that opportunity. Brian was an honor guard for the Norfolk Police Department. He was an honor guard through multiple different events that they had. He was also nationally active in being the honor guard and actively doing things nationally. He left his wife Rebecca and the children, and I can't imagine the heartache and the grief that her and those children have got to have suffered because of the actions of one madman. They luckily have been a faith-filled family. They've had just so much support, and through the Blue family, meaning all of the police officers, their family members, the Fraternal Order of Police, they have just reached out, and they've really stepped up for Rebecca and those children. This year, for instance, when the children started school, officers from the Norfolk Department went and took those children to school. And they walked them to school. They had Donuts for Dad day at one of the little boys' schools. And 4 officers stepped up and took donuts and went and spent donuts with Dad at school with this little boy, because he didn't have a father now. And so these officers have stepped up and really been a huge support to her.
Tell about the one boy's birthday. And
his oldest, Brian's oldest son, had a birthday this year, and this boy's birthday wish was not to get gifts. His birthday wish was to have police officers come to his party, and he didn't think that anybody would come to his party. Lo and behold, there were dozens of officers that showed up at his birthday party. Not only did they show up to his party, but departments from all over the country and some out of the country sent this child gifts or like patches from their departments. Our local sheriff's department, I contacted them, spoke to the sheriff about this, and he sent this little boy patches from the department, actually sent him his duty badge in honor of his dad, so that this boy actually felt like he had family all over the place. It was extremely overwhelming to Rebecca and the kids for the way everybody reached out to him was amazing. And to see the support that came together for this child's 10th birthday party. I mean, when all he wanted was police officers to come to his party. I mean, what a simple wish. Most kids would want, every toy that they can imagine. And this little boy's simple wish was just to have the Blue family unite and come together. And he was extremely overwhelmed and was so happy, because that's exactly what he got, plus all of the other things that he got. And I mean, they had sent him money and gifts, and he was just an extremely happy little boy. And it was actually his mother had made the remark that it was the first time in a year that she actually saw him with a genuine smile.
Comment about the pictures of the kids. Pictures on Facebook with the kids.
Oh, she had posted videos and pictures of the little boy thanking officers and whole departments for sending him the gifts. She posts a lot of pictures of her children on Facebook, and it's heartbreaking to see these pictures, because the youngest boy is the only one that actually really smiles or looks happy, and it's because he's a little too young to actually understand, that Daddy's gone to heaven. The older two understand, and the smiles that they force are obviously forced smiles. It's heartbreaking to see these pictures of these children, because that they are not happy. That they are, they have such a huge loss because of their dad being gone. And it's heartbreaking to see these pictures. When he was going through his birthday party and she was showing videos of his birthday party, this little boy actually got to be a little boy again. He actually looked happy. He looked excited. I mean, they go and they celebrate certain things at their dad's grave. Their dad's gravestone is beautiful. Has a police car. His police car, the exact replica of his police car engraved on his stone, his unit number, his end of watch date. It's a beautiful, beautiful headstone. And they will go and they'll have picnics, and they'll have a picnic with Daddy, or they'll take cupcakes and sit and have cupcakes with Daddy. And it's sad to know that there are children that have to endure this kind of pain and that kind of tragedy in their lives because of madmen. It's heartbreaking to see what these kids have to go through, but the outreach of the departments around the nation has just been wonderful for the healing. They've gotten all matching shirts that's got their dad's pictures, and they had a lady volunteer, and I thought this was absolutely awesome. She took Brian's old uniforms and made each one of the kids teddy bears, and had his badges and his patches and stuff put on these teddy bears. So they've got their daddy bears with them, and that's Brian's uniform, Brian's patches, something that they can always keep that they had from their dad. And I think that's awesome.
Tell everyone about when you heard the story of the boy and how that got you to looking.
It was actually last night. We were just getting ready for bed, and we were doing our one last, go through Facebook and check everything, and I see this story, and I watched this story, and I'm thinking, man, that sounds so familiar. All these circumstances sound so familiar, and I told Ed, I said, I bet this is the boy that lost his life the same day Brian did. And so I started researching, and I was Googling it, and it came up instantly. Norfolk, Virginia, police officer Brian Jones, and the whole story that went along with it. And I knew just in the story that they had on the 700 Club about this boy, it didn't mention anything about the circumstances or anything. It was just his heartwarming story of his journals and his parents and their healing, and they touched on a brief bit of what had happened, but didn't go into a lot of detail. When I'm listening to this story and I started reading it, I'm thinking, this whole story is just too coincidental to not be to not be the same story. And so when I started Googling it and I started coming across and absolutely it absolutely was the same story. And it really makes you wonder and think about how precious life really is. And I loved when Mark's mom in this story was talking about the stump, the last thing that heard Mark's breath, and that she had to have that stump. I thought that was absolutely awesome. And then how she turned it around, and her husband brings the stump home to her, and she plants live flowers on it, and she turned the last thing to hear Mark's breath into the first thing that saw Mark's face when he looked into heaven. I thought that was absolutely an awesome, awesome way to take a tragedy that this woman had to live through by losing her son in such a horrible manner and turn that around to make that such a beautiful thought, knowing that, that stump was the first thing that got to see his face when he was going into heaven. And And I thought, man, this lady has got it. She just really, she handled that. And like she said, God, you hurt my feelings. You're sovereign, but you hurt my feelings. And I cannot even begin to imagine how she felt. I just can't. I cannot imagine losing any one of my children, any one of my stepchildren. That would be one of the most horrible things. But this lady and her faith and her husband and her family's faith has taken such a horrible tragedy and has absolutely turned it around to make it a wonderful thing. And I'm sure that they have their times even now that they want to just sit and cry. And then they may still be mad at God. But they know how to pull themselves out of that. And I just thought, man.
She even referenced scripture that David was upset with God.
Right.
And
Right.
and we know David.
Yep. I mean, it was, I just thought I was so glad to see this, because knowing this whole situation and knowing about it from day one, when Brian was shot and when Mark was shot, it really hit home personally because of knowing them, because of being personally involved and knowing who these people are, and having the background that I have. And I shared a common bond with them, with the feeling of what if that was my family. I cannot even imagine. But having that thin blue line common bond makes it even more personal. But knowing them, and then when I was reading this story, I thought, man, this has to be the same story. And not remembering what Mark's name was, because of not knowing him, made me go back and do the research and figure out, and putting two and two together and coming up with this. And I'm so glad that they had this story and that we were able to share that story, because what an inspiration these people are. I mean, it's just amazing.